don't go over. So it is my privilege to introduce Chaplain Colonel Andrew Gibson. He has served in the Maine Army National Guard for over 32 years. At present, Chaplain Gibson is the Senior Chaplain, Maine National Guard, and the Chaplain of Deployment Cycle Support. In his current role, he oversees the spiritual needs for the soldiers and military families of the Maine Guard, coordinates resources, including military, state, and civilian professional providers who support our service members, veterans, and military families, teaches seminars on military culture and reintegration issues, and serves on the Adjutant General's full-time staff. He was deployed twice to Bosnia and Afghanistan and served in response to Hurricane Katrina in 2005. His military education includes the Army Senior Service College Harvard Fellowship, the Army Command and General Staff College, the Chaplain Officer Advanced Course, and the Army Chaplain Officer Basic Course. Chaplain Gibson is ordained in the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches and served First Congregational Church, Pittsfield, Maine, from 1992 through 2003. Andy and his wife of 37 years, Nancy, live in Pittsfield, Maine. Andy and Nancy have 3 grown children, Daniel, Craig, and Kelly. Welcome, Colonel Gibson.
Thank you, and it's so great to see all of you. It's a pleasure to be joined and to speak to you folks. It does present. People who've seen me before know that I like to interact with the audience, and so this presents a particular challenge. But you need to know that when we get to the end of this, and if you're not exhausted from already watching this thing all day, I'm certainly going to hang around for any questions or anything that people would like to ask. So, but if you really feel compelled, I think there's a little thing where you can put your hand up and I might be able to answer it. I'm not in control of it, so Lori will have to keep an eye on it. If someone puts their hand up, I'm certainly willing to answer a question as we're going along. So Lori, if you could fire up the slides, would be great.
All right, and are we seeing, Camden, what we should be seeing?
Sure are.
Awesome.
All right, that's awesome. Okay, so I am going to give a disclaimer in just a second, but I have to give a disclaimer before I give the disclaimer. And that is that most of what I'm talking about has to deal with the folks that are been serving the last, say, 30 years or so. When you are talking about hiring, when you're talking about business, there are plenty of people who are over 65 who are still working, still being employed, still looking to get employed. But also understand that prior to 1973, we had something called a draft in this country. And because of that, some of the people who joined did not join voluntarily. They did their duty, they came and they served their country, but they cut out of the same piece of fabric that most of the people that do this voluntarily. Some people adopt those qualities, some people do not and continue to resist them. So understand that you might run into this with a veteran, or you might not, but I think it's going to cover most people. And the other piece of this is, remember that I'm basically, you know, my first kill was a dinosaur. So just remember that what I'm talking about may not apply to some of our younger folks. When we talk about the stoicism and we talk about the quiet and the, I was doing one of these briefings to a Department of Labor group, and I made reference to John Wayne. And one of the students came up to me and said, sir, could you just tell me who John Wayne is? And I said, oh gosh, I'm sorry. I guess I got to give you someone more contemporary. I don't, maybe like Clint Eastwood, maybe. And he said, Clint Eastwood. And I went, well, so I guess I'm dating myself no matter what. So some of the younger people are a little bit more open with social media and stuff like that than I might describe. And so just be aware of that as well. So Lori, please.
Oh.
Okay. Now this is the official disclaimer, and these are my views. This is based on my actually now 33 years of working in the Guard and those deployments. They are not the official views of the Department of Defense, the United States Army, or the Maine National Guard. And this is good because I can tell the truth, that means. So the next slide. Some people say, why is it a chaplain that's doing this? Chaplains are responsible for handling religious rites, for doing religious services, religious counseling. And we do that by performing or providing it. If we, for example, I'm not a Catholic priest, I can't do Holy Communion. I need to find a priest to supply that need, and that is certainly a huge part of what we do. But we also, we hold it to be self-evident that everybody has their own essence. You can call it a soul, you can call it a spirit, you can call it a consciousness, whatever it is. It's a generally helpful principle, actually by our, that this is an element that everyone shares, whether they believe in religion. And the chaplain gets to cultivate that, helps a person develop their own. And so we are in a unique position to be able to, with you, one of the, well, the core needs. So slide, please. The next one is just the obligatory agenda slide. We should plow through this pretty quickly. So next slide. All right. Basically, you have the branches. Army is the ground troops. Navy is the seagoing. Air Force is, you know, obviously they in the air. We now have Space Force, so I do have to update this slide. They don't have a uniform yet. And they don't have a theme song, but you know, people have talked about maybe Star Trek uniforms and the theme to Star Trek, but we'll see. But they will be handling things that are beyond the atmosphere. The Marine Corps is technically part of the Navy. They fall under the Secretariat of the Navy. They hate admitting that, by the way. Oh, but do you know if we have any Marines that are tuning in today? I mean, if there are, I'll slow down. But I mean, and now I do my qualification. The Army forces, I got to admit, the Marine Corps is they actually operate land, air. They're awesome. And one of the important things to remember about a Marine is once a Marine, always a Marine. There's no such thing as an ex-Marine. So if you ever address a person as an ex-Marine, be careful. You might get a talking to. But they are, just don't tell anyone that I said that. But the Department of Defense, but they are seconded in times of war, particularly in Vietnam. They did a lot of stuff. And they are part are very, very similar to the rest, to the Department of Defense elements. And so we include them in this briefing as well. So next slide. When you talk about these three things, folks that are active, and you're talking about working in civilian employment here, you're not going to see too many of those because they've got a job. They are living on or near a post or base. They get all of their services from that base or post, whether it be employment services, whether it be they go shopping there. If they choose to worship, they worship there. And so it becomes a very self-contained structure. And in Maine, we really only have one active duty base, which is the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. And that's, you know, obviously quite small, and it really is hard for a person from Fort Kent to access those services. And a lot of times we who are in the reserve components aren't eligible for those services because of that. Reserve components. Now, let me take a half step back, and that is to say that if you do see somebody who is active, they are probably separated. They might be retired. They might have separated before they got to retirement age. If we are talking about some of our Vietnam veterans who were drafted, they might have only been in the service a year and a half, gone home. And so that might be their entire experience of the military. And it obviously would have been all combat related or at least deployment related. So the ones who you find now who either they did their 6 years and said, yeah, this isn't my cup of tea. Maybe they did 12 years and they have children and they say, well, it's time for me to move on. Or the folks that actually do the full 20 years. You're going to see similarities, but these folks, the longer that they've been in, the more inculcated they become with these different aspects. The Guard and Reserve, I'll tell you how they're the same, and then I'll tell you how they're different. We're the same in that we, for the most part, and there is always exceptions to everything I'm going to say structurally, but the Guard and Reserve, we get together one weekend a month and then 15 days a year, and we train, and we are held to the same exact standards as the active duty. So what they do in 365 days, we have to do in 39. And while we are doing that, we also have to maintain a civilian job on the side, well, if we want to eat. So we are an interesting group of folks. We bring a lot of diversity to the military. When we do get deployed, a lot of times we bring in a lot of gifts and talents that you don't get if you just get military training. Where the Guard and Reserve are different is that the reserves are Title 10, just like the Title 10 U.S. Code, just like the active services, so they are purely federal. The National Guard is Title 32, which means that actually, as I'm right now, my commander-in-chief is Governor Mills. We work for the governor when we are on Title 32. We work for the president when we are on Title 10. And why that's important to you folks as being employed, the reserve folks don't necessarily have as much control over their own life. If they get called up, they go. We do too, but there's a whole larger process. The National Guard deploys as units. Now this has changed more recently, but for the most part, you don't have onesies and twosies going off with the National Guard. You usually deploy as a unit. And when I went to Bosnia, we had to create a unit of chaplains to go and support it. We've had people who have deployed as individuals, but we have to build a unit around that one person. So it's a much more complicated thing. And the governor has to sign her okay that we can go. So very different in terms of when you're talking about employment and when you're talking about running a business, about how much control you have over the time. And I know, Lori, we talked about when people go and we don't really get our orders to go, and that kind of screws up the schools because we can't tell them that we're going to be in the semester or not. And so a lot of what happens there is that transition to Title 10 when we deploy, we can't write that order until we know they're actually going to deploy. And so that sometimes that doesn't come until they're actually off at their mobilization station. So it's a real challenge, to be honest. Less so in the reserves, still a challenge to whoever's employing them because they're leaving, but it's a little bit more mechanical in Title 32. So next slide, please. When we use the word veteran, we usually use it colloquially. Most of us just kind of say anybody who ever wore a uniform or wearing it now. And that's fine. We do it too. We call people, who are fellow military members, veterans. But what benefits they're entitled to can be very, very different. For example, VA, Veterans Affairs. You have to be on Title 10 and or you have had to have at least one deployment on Title 10 in order to be eligible for VA benefits. There's always exceptions, so don't get too bogged down by this. But the fact of the matter is you could do a 30-year National Guard career. If you never got deployed, when you retire, you're not eligible for VA services. And so this concept of, well, you're finished with the military, go off and go to let the VA take care of you is not an accurate statement. Who is eligible is very complicated, and it can depend on all sorts of different things. So, and the reason I'm telling you this, and this is particularly for those of you who deal with employment or employing people, understand that there's no way you're going to become an expert on this, but we do have experts on this. They're called Veteran Service Officers. They work at the Bureau of Veteran Services. They work at VA, and call them if you're worried about eligibility or you're concerned, because there's some benefits such as training. You can have one of your employees go get training if they are eligible for VA benefits. I know actually Camden does a lot of the okaying of that training and what, who's eligible and who's not. So there's a lot to it. don't try to become experts. Just be aware that different types of veterans get different types of benefits. And that veteran probably is not aware of what they are entitled to. And you can get that, and it is available for that veteran to go find out what they can get. I'm not going to go into the other one, so we'll go to the next slide. Ranks. These are about 2 years old, so just be aware of that. But you can see that starts out pretty low, looks like, an E4 coming out of the military. It's, say, age of 24, 25, doesn't look like they're making very much. But understand that E4 might be, well, married, might have a kid or two, might not be married, might still have a kid or two. And that E4 is getting probably now about $30,000 worth of insurance. That's what it would cost to insure yourself, a spouse, and a couple of kids, as well as they are insured in the military. Also understand that they get free housing, so they're not paying a mortgage. So what you're looking at, yeah, maybe that it tops out at about $33,000, but what they're making is worth more like $50,000 to $60,000. When they come into the civilian workforce and find out that their starting wage is going to be about $10 an hour, that's a rude awakening. Oh, and you're going to take out money for my insurance? Oh, and you're not going to pay for my house? Oh. So understand that when you are employing or when you're going to go into your own work, that these are a lot of considerations that kind of come as a wake-up call, not only to the veteran, but also to the employer. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can mitigate that if you're talking about hiring or if you're talking about going into it. The E's, and again, these are pay rates. I'm not going so much into the ranks because they're what we call the ranks in the different services is like completely different. I have no clue how the Navy works. I've got some clue how the Marine Corps works. I have a little more clue about how the Air Force works, but we all call it different, but we all have the same pay grades. And these are pay grades. E stands for enlisted. Those are the folks who actually do the work, do the training, day-to-day stuff that we got to get done. Those are the ones who know how to shoot, move, and communicate, but also how to build buildings, fix electricity, run generators, run computers, fix nuclear reactors. I mean, that's who does the stuff. Warrant officers are people, and chief warrant officers, that's what the CW stands for. You're a chief warrant officer as of Warrant Officer 2. There are 5 different grades ranging, and that's right. And you can see that they make a fair amount. And by the way, they're also getting that insurance, and also, and I'm talking about active duty now, of course. And they're also getting that insurance and that housing. Those are experts in certain fields, particularly administration, human resources, maintenance, logistics, and in the Army anyway, helicopter pilots. So you've got some really interesting folks there. They used to be enlisted, became highly expert in a field, and then earn that higher pay because they are expert in that field. Think if we talk about civilian employ, how that could translate into some wonderful jobs on the civilian side, whether they're self-employed or working for somebody else. And commissioned officers, what we do, well, according to the people who are not commissioned officers, we don't do anything. But what we are supposed to be doing is we're supposed to be planning. We are the one who issues the orders. We're the ones who do all of the administrative type stuff at the managerial level. And that goes all the way from a second lieutenant, who, by the way, to be an officer, you have to have a bachelor's degree. Many of our enlisted and also someone has to push paper. Well, you're absolutely right, Camden. Thank you. And I appreciate that. And I'll remember that whenever I can hurt you. But anyway, the officers have to have a bachelor's degree. Many of our lower ranking folks also have bachelor's degrees. Many of our lower ranking folks have advanced degrees. And one of the examples I like to bring is when I went to Afghanistan about 15 years ago, we had an E8. Now that's a very high ranking enlisted person, but they're still enlisted. This E8, his full-time job, he was the senior legal advisor to Olympia Snowe. So he was a lawyer, And he chose to do the enlisted stuff because he wanted to do something different than his regular job. And so this is not a function of intelligence or ability. It's a function of what you want to do. Do you want to push paper, or do you want to actually do something? And so it's not a function of intelligence whatsoever. Next slide, please. Now, several years ago, we realized that we were getting a whole bunch of young people that didn't even understand what a value was. So not only did we have to teach them what values were, we had to teach them what we expected of them. And these are what the Army holds up as its, everyone is expected to adhere to these. Everyone is expected to, as a matter of fact, I do a daily newsletter. We were just talking about selfless service because that's kind of what it had to deal with. The idea that you would sign on a piece of paper and go serve a document, the Constitution of the United States, that you're willing to, well, you know, many people have said it before me, write a blank check to the United States, the people of the United States, that I'm willing to die on your behalf so that you can be free. That's selfless service, and that's only one of the values. Now, we love acronyms. So if you look down the left-hand side and you kind of squint a little bit, you'll see it spells leadership. And leadership is one of our core things that we talk about. Leadership goes all the way from that E1 all the way to that high, we actually don't have any five-star generals anymore. The last one died about 30 years ago, but closer to 40. But anyway, everyone from that four-star general all the way down to an E1 is expected to be a leader. And we teach leadership from the first day that they get into the military. When they go to basic training, picture yourself 17, you're going off and you're in a strange world. Some kids from Maine had never left Maine, and all of a sudden now they're in South Carolina or in Georgia or Texas, and they're meeting all people. Some people have told me that the first time they ever met a black person was when they went to basic training, and they are expected to all be the same. And one of the things that I remember, the first day that we were there, my drill sergeant said, "You notice that, well, first off, we call each other by our last names very often." And, and the drill sergeant made reference to that. In the military, we call each other by our last names. And you know why? He said, because right now, your last name is your first name, and your last name is U.S. Army. Because now you're all in the same family. And I don't care if you're black or white or brown or any other color. I don't care if you're male or female. I don't care if you are a Christian, if you're a Jew, a Muslim. It doesn't matter. You are now all in the same family, and these are your brothers and sisters, and you will treat them that way. And it's just like right from day one, that's what you learn. And you're 17 and you go into basic training, probably about a week in, the drill sergeant's going to look at you and point at you and say, you're in charge of that one and that one. You are going to be responsible for getting them to the formation on time. You get them the right equipment. You've got to make sure that they ate breakfast. You got to make sure that they got their physical fitness and their personal hygiene done. Got it? Go. And no matter how well you do, about a week from now, the drill sergeant will fire you. And then he'll hire one of the other two to watch after you and the other person. And it teaches you several things. First off, even if you do it right, the enemy gets a vote and you may lose anyway. It also teaches you that you have to not only lead, but you need to follow your leadership. So leadership is a very powerful thing to us, and it goes right up through all the services. And that's why we put these in this order. And so we have those 7 values. So next slide. The Navy and the Marine Corps, they only have 3 values. That's probably because they couldn't memorize any more than that. But that's okay. You can see that they still reflect some of the same ideas and ideals that we have and are expected to adhere to. Next slide. Air Force, again, they only have 3, but that's not because they're not smart enough to memorize more than that. It's because they don't want to spend time memorizing something when they could be playing golf. Excuse me just a moment. I'm on the line, please. Okay. So and then the next slide, the Coast Guard, as you might imagine, they have very similar to the Navy and the Marines. Seagoing, same idea, same principles. All right, next slide. Here's some of what connects us. Here's some of those things, and when I say romantic, I don't mean that you'll find us kneeling under a balcony quoting Shakespeare. What I mean is that we have a tendency to be very idealistic. You remember the old movies, and I talked about John Wayne, but remember the old movies where all the good guys wore the white hats and all the bad guys wore the black hats? You could always tell who the good guy was and the bad guy was as soon as you sat down. That's kind of how we think. We kind of think that you can tell a good guy like that and a bad guy like that, and that there is right and wrong, that there are principles by which we should all operate. That's kind of what attracts us to the military in the first place. But you're 17, you go in with those values. Those values are reinforced very often in basic training. And then you go overseas. And I'll tell you a story. We were in a Black Hawk helicopter flying about 1,000 meters off the ground. We were coming towards a village, and I could see out of the front canopy, there was a woman completely covered in a burqa, rushing her children to get them inside the walls of their little village. And I turned to the translator. I said, she's not afraid that we're going to shoot her. I mean, she doesn't think we're going to kill them. He said, no, that's not it at all. Even though she's completely covered, if she gives anyone the way that she was trying to attract the men from the helicopter to come down and see her, some man from her family would have to stone her to death. Now, when you're 17 and you hear something like that and realize that those are our allies, it makes you go, gee, maybe the white hats aren't so white, at least not like I thought they were. On the other hand, we had a situation at Bagram Airfield there. A person pulled into the first entry post. He was trying to bring you've probably heard of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. When they are in a vehicle, we call it a vehicle IED or a VBID, we call them. When they brought the VBID in, he was stopped properly and according to protocol, but found out he wasn't going to get any further. So he pulled the cord and the car blew up and killed 4 of our people, including a Korean from South Korea who was actually under our auspices and another American soldier. And 20, and we hated that guy. I mean, we hated him. And we had to send about 18, 19-year-old kids to go pick up the pieces, try to see if we could figure out if this was someone we knew. And when they got to that vehicle, they found out that his hands had been handcuffed to the steering wheel. And we also learned that what they would do is they would family and say that if you don't do this, we're going to kill your family. If you do this, we're going to give your family, well, enough food and everything to live the rest of their life. Gee, that black hat doesn't look so black anymore. What do I do with this? What do I do with my principles? Well, most people get along with it very well, as a matter of fact, and form wonderful coping skills that maybe a civilian who hasn't seen this stuff don't have. We do have a certain percentage that never quite get their head wrapped around it, and we have to help some of them out when they get back. But for the most part, most people work out some sort of an idea and have extremely good coping skills, going far away from what the myths that you might find about the military are. Most folks are able to, and it also means that when you integrate them into a different community, they can integrate much more quickly because they're not so ready for everybody to be a white hat or a black hat. We also admire resilience and self-sufficiency. We work well in teams and with groups. On the other hand, we don't work really well if someone's looking over our shoulder. We don't ask for help very often. Maybe sometimes we should more often, but we don't, because we admire people who do it on their own. And we admire superiors who do it, and we admire superiors who trust us to get it done. George Patton, known as one of those great yellers and screamers and the whole bit, he has one of my favorite quotations. And I apologize that he used non-inclusive language, but he said, "Never tell a man what to do. Tell him what you want done, and then step back and be amazed by his brilliance." You wouldn't think of a George Patton saying something like that, but that's exactly how he operated. And we allow the people to, do it on their own. we're very critical of each other. We're very critical of almost any situation. We make fun of each other. We tease each other. We pick on each other. Have you watched a military movie with a vet? And for those vets out there, I got to tell you, watching a military movie with a vet, we're real pains in the ass. Because, I mean, there'll be like all this action going on and there's wars being fought, and we'll go, hey, wait a minute, that guy's ribbon isn't in the right place. Or that guy's, he would never go into war with the collar turned down like that, you know. And you know, we're picking on all these little things, and the people around us who don't know what we're talking about go, come on, just watch the movie. But we can't. We can't watch the movie because it's all this, you know, all this getting wrong. I can't take anything else for granted that you're saying is right. Hurt Locker came out, won the Academy Award. Fantastic movie. Hollywood loved it. It's all wrong. They did everything absolutely wrong. I mean, there's this one scene with this guy who's a explosive ordnance disposal guy. You know, and he's sitting there. He's a wire or the red wire, trying to figure out which one to cut, or else the bomb's going to go up. We don't do that. What we do is we pull everybody away. We get all the civilians away. We put a bunch of C4 in a pit. We put some sandbags on it, and then we blow it up. We spent like $200,000 training that guy. You think we're gonna kill him by going red wire, green wire, red wire, green wire? It's just ridiculous. And a veteran can't keep watching that, because the more mistakes they see, the more that they feel that producer, that director, even if they had a military advisor, they obviously ignored them, and they don't have attention to detail. And that's what we're trained for, is attention to detail. We spot things that other people don't see. When we come into a room, we're looking around at, you know, how we can possibly get out, what people in the room might be allies, what people in the room might be someone we would have to protect. And that's not PTSD, folks, that's training. And it gets very deep inside the core of who we are. And we're always paying attention to what's going on. And if you have details that need to be done in your business, this is something that veterans excel on, because they'll spot when something's wrong. They'll spot when a screw is halfway out of a thing that no one else noticed. And so you can depend on that. Humorous, we think we're funny. You may not. We, you know, talk a lot about body parts and a lot of other things. We do tell ethnic and homophobic jokes. Part of it is welcoming in, part is just being open with each other. It's a little easier for me. I grew up in New York, and we're kind of like that anyway. It's just a way of give and take, and you get everything out on the table. It's also something called gallows humor, which I think a lot of you are, if I have any medical people in the room, first responders in the room, you know that we have to make these jokes, because what we do is so, well, it can be sickening. And to be able to let loose and to laugh with other people who've had similar experiences is a great way to do it. We do very much believe in Murphy's Law. Whatever might go wrong will go wrong. We have our own list in Murphy. If things are going well, it's probably an ambush. If you can see them, they can shoot you. And obviously my favorite one of all is, as you're going into battle with your helmet and your protective gear and your weapon, just remember they were all built by the lowest bidder. So it's just pretty much how we run. So next slide, please. So here's some common misconceptions. All right, first off, we're not all Republicans. All right, I know you think so, but and some of us actually listen to NPR too. So just understand that we are very political, but you're not necessarily going to hear our politics. First off, wearing this uniform, it's illegal for me to discuss politics, whether it be a candidate, whether it be a cause, whether it be something I'm not allowed to. It's literally against the law. But even when this uniform is off, and even when I'm talking with my friends, I'm very guarded about what I say, because, well, we believe in that document that we put our hand up to support. And the people that are in place and the things that are on the referenda that we have to vote on were put there by the people of the United States of America and or the people of Maine. If they put that there, that's who I'm there to protect. And if I insult them, then I insult my country and I insult my state, and I will not do that. That goes against what I believe. And that's what people feel. So even if it were legal I have a feeling that most people, you're not going to find out what they stand for. They're not going to stand, whether they stand for this president or that president or whatever else. Now, amongst ourselves, we talk an awful lot about it, and we're very political, and we vote, and we care. But we also don't necessarily share that with the civilian side of the house, knowing that we have a great responsibility to protect everybody, regardless of if they're in a party or whether they vote or not. We protect everybody who stands in these shores. We're not robotic. A lot of people assume that we just go marching down the street and we do whatever we're told. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We have highly centralized planning, but highly decentralized execution. So what it means is that, yeah, we make the plans and the battle order and all that stuff, but once it gets out there, we actually give awards for ingenuity, for going off the map, for finding out new ways of conquering the same old problems. Remember what I said about George Patton? That is something that we embrace. And a lot of times the reason why we beat enemies, even if the enemy has any kind of superior equipment or whatever else, we beat them because we are more elastic, we are more able. And as I mentioned, from the top general all the way to that bottom enlisted, everyone knows what the mission is. Because we always assume that someone in that chain of command could die. And we don't want to be left out there not knowing what we have to do. So, Bill Belichick says it with the New England Patriots all the time. Someone gets injured, it's the next man up. And that's exactly how we operate. And so everyone knows what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. And we're very able to deal with differing things. Violence, we use violence as a tool, but we are not actually violent inherently. If we are, we're not going to make very good service members, because if you're violent and you go off half-cocked, we can't depend on you. We need to know that you are going to do your job and do it well and do it with restraint and not, and one of the reasons why you pay $800 billion a year for the Department of Defense is because we have bombs that can blow up this guy, and the mosque over here and the museum over here don't get blown up. We could carpet bomb the whole thing. And it would be a lot cheaper. But we don't work that way. And I always like to stop for a minute and just remind everybody this, especially in times like what we're going through right now. You live in the most moral country that has ever existed in the history of the world. And the reason I say that is because never in history has one nation had so much military power, so much economic power, so much political power, and not gone out and attempted to conquer its neighbors. We don't do it. That's not what we believe in. And I believe that's because we have civilians who run our military. Our military does not run the country, the civilians do. The commander-in-chief, the president, is a civilian. The secretary of the Department of Defense, civilian. The secretaries of the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, civilian. And those people are appointed by the people who are elected by you. So we depend on you in America to go out and vote, and know when you do vote, and know when you do go out there that that is a sacred act. And we depend on you to be politically active, whichever side you're on. That is what, because we follow the orders of the people who are placed over us, and you place them over us. So understand that we are very moral, regardless of what you might be hearing about what's going on right now. I don't know that any other country could withstand what we're going through so easily as we are. Intolerant. We're not intolerant. We have to learn how to be tolerant of each other and to care for each other. Again, we're a team. The Army, the military actually was integrated about 4 years before Rosa Parks got on the front end of that bus. And God bless her, what a brave woman. I mean, she really led something. But understand that the military was already integrated at that point. You could be serving down at Fort Benning, Georgia. You could have a beer with a friend of yours who's a soldier who's black, and you could have a beer together on post. But if you went downtown into Atlanta, So remember that we were way ahead. Yeah, we've been a little bit slow at integrating females into combat positions. Frankly, it's hard to find females who want to be in combat positions, but we need to work harder at that too, and we have been. Bullyish. We can't be bullish. We don't want to be bullied. Matter of fact, a lot of us were bullied. And a lot of us, that's why we joined the military in the first place. We kind of like killing bullies. And that's not something that bothers us too bad. But we are not bullies ourselves. And we use only enough force that is necessary to complete the mission. When it's time to stop the mission, we stop the mission. You will hear about mistakes that are made. A hospital gets bombed or something like that. You need to understand fully and foremost that that is a mistake. It was never intended, and we would never intend it as the way we are trained. And the last thing I want to, another misconception is that we're dumb. The old saying, you can either go to jail or go to the military or whatever it is. That's just not the case anymore. In this pandemic world, all the kids who graduated last May, last June, what you might find interesting is only 27% of them were eligible for military service. That's right. 73% couldn't pass the entrance exam. We do have one. They did not have a high school diploma. We don't take GEDs. Again, there's waivers for everything, but we don't generally take GEDs. They're not physically fit. They don't meet the height and weight standards. They have former drug use or former criminal use, criminal cases. Those records that are sealed because you're a juvie? Well, they have to be open if you want to join the military. And if you have criminality in your past, again, there are waivers, but if you have criminality in the past, you're not eligible for military service. So what you are talking about is, and I think Lori put it very well when we were talking before this meeting, we represent less than 1% of the population, and 27% of that is who is actually eligible to do that service. So think about that very elite person that you have sitting in front of you who's applying for a job with you, who you are training for a job, or if you are a veteran, take some pride in yourself and understand that you are amongst the very special people in this country. Marine Corps too. Some lingo. That's the next slide. I like to do this because I think how you use your language oftentimes indicates how a lot about your culture. In the Army, we say hua. The younger people don't like hua as much as we used to. The Marine Corps does say ura or just ar. Don't confuse the two. Don't try to use the two if you don't really know what you're meaning. We'll kind of blow through these pretty quickly, but Lori, if we go to the next slide, I'll show you what the definition of both is. It means all of those things. And then next slide. It also means all those things. And the next slide, it also means all those things. Of course, I'm particularly fond of number 16. I actually have had people at the end of a prayer say hua, so it does carry through even there. Next slide, please. Lingo. We take military lingo and we make it kind of metaphorical when we get into the civilian world. My 6 refers to when we are moving. In front of us is 12, to our right is 3, to our left is 9, and behind us is our 6. Where are we most vulnerable? Back there. And I don't care what service that you're in, you always make provision for your back. You always have one soldier or Marine that's facing backwards when you go into battle. You always have one fighter plane trailing the others. You always have one ship trailing the others to make sure that your back is always covered. Do you think we put the person we trust the least back there or the person we trust the most? Well, obviously it's the most. And so when we get into the civilian world and we say, hey, I got your 6, that means you can trust me to get this done. And if I tell somebody else that you can trust this person, and I'm talking about you, if I tell them you can trust this person because this person's got your 6, I've just given you one of the greatest compliments that you could possibly receive. That means I would trust you, and I trust telling somebody else that you're trustworthy. So it's pretty powerful. Stay in your own lane. A lot of people think that that refers to driving, but it actually has to do with marksmanship. We fire at a target that it's the end of another lane. And when you're 17 and you're nervous, a lot of times you accidentally will fire into somebody else's lane. And you each have 40 rounds, and 80 hits on this target and 0 on my target, and everyone wonders what happened. So just before they say commence firing, they yelled, "Stay in your own lane." Metaphorically, that means we think that you're getting into my business and you shouldn't be in my business. If I'm applying for a job and you start asking me about a lot of personal questions, I go, whoa, 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 whoa. I just want to be a supervisor here. I don't want to be psychoanalyzed. Stay in your own lane. Now, a few weeks from now, you might be able to talk to me a bit more familiarly, but not when I first meet you. So stay in your own lane, get out of my business. All ate up. That's what we refer to as equipment that's old and rotted and rusted. But we also refer to it in our lives if things aren't going well. My wife just left me. My dog died. My kid's on drugs. My life's all ate up. So just think of that. If you hear someone say that, just think of that rusty old heap. Tracking. That just means when you're on a muddy road, you find out if you're in a smaller vehicle. If you get in the tracks of the larger vehicle, you can actually get there to that same place when you want to. In the military or in the civilian world, when we say that, we just mean we understand what you're saying. We're going to arrive at the same location. I'm tracking with you. I get it. I understand. At ease, that's when I added to this after I started doing this. This just refers to how deep it is in our hearts. This refers to a case at Togus. I had a student who was a nurse intern at Togus. That's the VA hospital, for those of you who don't know. And there was a man who was lying on a bed, a veteran, and he was just flailing around in a terrible delirium, and they were trying to hold his arms down. They were trying to get a needle in his arm, and they just couldn't do it, even with 3 orderlies. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, a nurse from Vietnam, who had served in Vietnam, came into the room. Now, in the Army, we have a couple of things. We have what's called drill and ceremonies. I'm familiar with attention, and there's at ease, but at ease means something else to us as well. And that is when the room is all abuzz and everyone's talking and someone who's going to come in and address the crowd is coming in, or there's some announcement that has to be made, someone will yell out, "At ease!" And that means stop, freeze, and listen to what's going on. Well, this Vietnam veteran nurse saw this guy in a delirium who could not be held down, and she yelled out, "At ease!" And the guy froze. And they were able to get that needle in his arm. So even at that level of consciousness, that's how deep this stuff goes. And that's why it's so important to be somewhat familiar with it. Next slide. We do use the phonetic code. Lima Charlie is LC. It means that loud and clear. I hear you loud and clear. Charlie Foxtrot, well, the Charlie means cluster. This is a government presentation, so I can't really say what the F stands for, but I think we all are familiar with it. And by the way, yes, we do use bad language. It's very important for you to be clear with us if we are going over the line. Feel free to do so. You might get the eye roll, but guess what? The next time that they do say something, they'll catch themselves and go, "Oh, I'm sorry." So don't be afraid. We like to know where our left and right limits are. If you're comfortable with it and it's comfortable in your business situation, fine. But FUBAR, they use that on colleges a lot. That's the same F, by the way. But I'll just say fouled up beyond all recognition. That's how we look at the world. Snafu came out of World War II. That points out 2 things. It's all those black and white war movies from World War II where no one ever swore. Well, that's not exactly accurate. This also points to our cynicism, because what snafu actually stands for is situation normal, all fouled up. All right. So that's how we say the situation is normal, because it is all messed up, or that other word. So next slide. Okay. Here's some of the things that I wanted to insert here. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time on it, but unfortunately we only have the time that we have. These come from a presentation that I do on how to keep veterans at home, as it were, once you've hired them. And I'm going to try to gather them all together in a real quick thing. And that is, you can read the slides. I'm not going to sit here and read them to you. But when you have served in the military, it was your job to keep the people of America safe and free. This is a pretty important thing. And we still have to remind them sometimes when they're sitting in a mud hole in Afghanistan that that's what they're doing. You can imagine when you come back home and you're working at a job where you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. It's, wait a minute. Um, every business, every job is important. And all too often, I think we think we're just looking for another buck, or we made this company so that we could make money. Anybody who makes a company to make money is not going to be happy in life. We all want to have a purpose. I ask this question, and I usually do it interactively, but I'll give you the answer pretty quickly. And that is, what job in this world, or what umbrella of jobs, what group of jobs do you think saves the most life every single day of the week? And I very often get responses like, "Oh, the military? Well, we do a lot. First responders, medical people, you hear all that. But you know who saves the most lives every day? Sanitation workers and sewer workers. The number one cause of death in the world is disease. And these people keep us healthy and alive every single day. Now, on the totem pole of sexy jobs, where do you think that one comes out? That's way down here. We don't think of it very much. And yet we depend on these people to keep us alive every single day. Go to a third world country, you'll find out very quickly how important sanitation workers are and sewage workers are, because they don't have it and they're dying, and we're not. So it's very important to remember that whatever job you have, it is of the utmost importance. I don't care if you're a paper pusher. I don't care if you are a person who is making widgets. If the widgets are being used to make somebody else's life better, then it's important. And that importance needs to be repeated over and over and over again, and reminded, because we can get so slogged in our day-to-day thing that we don't realize that everything we do affects everybody else at some level in the world. And without what we do, and maybe we're not as important as sanitation workers, but what we are doing is changing people's lives every single day, and reminding your veteran employee of this is so very important. We also want to know what this company does. I mean, so all right, we're making glass. What's the glass for? Well, this is a special glass that they use in hospitals. Really? So if they didn't have this glass in the hospitals, they would have a higher disease rate. Oh, wow. I thought we were just making glass. No, you are saving lives. Well, I'm just making, rubber for tires. Tires. What do you think is on an ambulance? What do you think is on every single car out there? What do you think is, how important is that? And so we want to know what the organization does. So often we get so siloed in our different jobs that we don't realize how effective and how important it is to that company, and then how important that company is to the world at large. We have to constantly remind ourselves, hey, we got to remind ourselves sometimes too, that what we are doing is central. Next slide, please. A veteran wants to know what is their role and why it's important. I mentioned communication on the first slide. Communication could be put on every single slide I have today. Being able to talk with each other is so important. Being able to, sometimes people get afraid of veterans because we tend to be somewhat stoic. We don't necessarily answer. We'll look right at you when you're talking at us, and that can be intimidating for some people. But understand that we're trying to garner. That's what we've been trained to do, as respectful. I still can't wrap my head around why women get upset when we call them ma'am. Ma'am is actually it's a conjunction of madame and mademoiselle. Everything in the military, including the word military, is based on French. I don't know if you know that, but so in essence, it's the French equivalent of Ms. And yet, it's a sign of respect when we say ma'am. It's not a sign of we think you're old or young, or just a sign of respect. And people seem to get all bent out of shape about it, but it's not. So knowing where we fit in, and knowing what our future holds. I talked earlier about how we seem to make a lot more money at a lower grade than you might in the civilian side. I may not want your job if you're only going to give me $25,000 to $30,000 a year, unless you tell me, well, yes, but if you work here for 6 months, you'll have the opportunity to move on. You have an ability to have some leadership roles. And by the way, veterans will take on leadership roles without extra pay. Don't tell them I told you that, but they will. because they like leadership roles and they like doing that. Now, after a while, they'll expect some more money, but the fact of the matter, and cross training, holy cow, cross training. That's what we do in the military. Everybody knows. I mean, what good am I as a chaplain if my driver dies and I can't drive the truck? So we do cross training all the time, and I recommend that particularly if you're in a factory type setting, but any type of setting where you would do so. Let's go to the next slide because I do want to leave some time for questions. And that is evaluation is my top bullet here, and it's my top bullet for a reason. In the military, we have an evaluation every 90 days. Now that's somewhat informal, but we usually try to get it down in writing because every year we do get a formal evaluation. And if you do it every 90 days and you get those bullets done, now it's much easier to write your yearly, and it also is easier to mark improvement. We evaluate you whether you've done well or done poorly or a mixture of the both. And I can't tell you how important this is if you have multiple people working in your business. It's a pain in the butt, and we're not always perfect about it, but it lets you be in contact with the person who's working with you. It lets them tell you if maybe they're having maybe having trouble with their spouse. Maybe I didn't show up last week because I just found out my mother has cancer and I got to go be with her more often than not. Maybe one of the other employees is giving me a hard time. You find that out in an evaluation, and you can do it as informally as you want, but I can't tell you how valuable an experience it is to know that most people associate evaluation with I screwed up and I've been called into the principal's office. If you keep it like that, yes, no one's going to want to, and this goes for civilians who are non-veterans as well. Understand that letting them know how they're doing and how they can do better is something that we welcome because we want to do better, because we want to do good, because one of the main things about being a veteran, and it's true of some other people too, but we basically want the team to win. And if we have to take a step back for the team to win, we're willing to do that. Because that selfless service, remember we talked about earlier? We're willing to do that because it's about the team. It's about the company. It's about others. It's about the people working around me being successful. Yeah, sure. Pay me a bonus, or at least give me a pat on the back or an attaboy, anything. But the fact of the matter is, if the team wins, then I feel like I've won. And it's more likely to keep me in your employ and more likely to make us both happy. So that's all I have for now. The next slide is the, again, obligatory question slide. Lori has the steering wheel, I think. So she'll probably be more able to answer if anybody has a question. That good, huh?
So I'm going to share with you one of our students here at USM shared a private comment that said this guy is so validating.
Oh, good. Thank you.
That's pretty high praise coming from your fellow veteran.
I'll get you 6.
I'm proud to kind of confirm, like Angie, thank you for sharing. I was texting Camden, I'll come clean. I was texting Camden and said, oh, I remember this guy. But a number of years ago, I was a few minutes late to your presentation and you schooled me. Then I felt justified because I had to leave early. So I let him do it. But no, I think, I sorry I missed the first part. I've got overlapping meetings all day today. But, one of the things that has really come in clear and again, very validating, for what we do working with our community and like with our faculty, is helping them understand some of what you presented. Particularly, Lori and I, back in the day, were dealing with one situation where this faculty member was just hell-bent that we needed to pull the student out of class, that we needed to do a behavioral intervention because he's really just focused on the war. And he's talking about shooting people, and he's talking about, that's it. He goes, I'm just very concerned, that's all he was doing. And we met the student, and nice. guy, and he was just very emotional. He's like, how do I do this? And then we just finally, I sat down with the professor and I said, what are the prompts that you're asking? And they said, well, it says go back, before college and share an event that was instrumental in, such and such. And I'm like, uh-huh. And so most of the students were freshmen who came out of high school. This guy was a sniper for 7 years. So I'm like, where do you want him to do? How far back? So he was doing what you asked. And so there was nothing more to it. But it took us, it was like most of the semester to finally get through all of that. So thank you for being so blunt and open and sharing that.
Thank you, Rodney. And thank you for helping with that guy. Not seeing any others. And sorry for schooling you.
I was late.
Well, thank you very much. Would it be okay to share your PowerPoint with folks?
100%.
Perfect. And I think, I'm not positive, but if your contact information wasn't there, if folks have follow-up questions that maybe come to them later on, would it be okay to share that, or would you rather have it kind of go through here?
They can share it. My email that you have will be good until April 30th. And then it's going to change. My phone number, my cell phone number is going to change in just about 2.5 weeks. So that's not good information. And my desk number, that's okay, because that'll come through my Outlook onto my computer, which I will have through April. So it's good for a couple of months, but after that it won't be, and I'll have a new hat to wear.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I know sometimes I've been to these things and then I think, oh, shoot, I really wish I'd asked that question. But one of the things you really highlighted very, very well was military culture and kind of the dark humor, the profanity. Yeah, Rodney's shaking his head, and we know. And what I appreciated that you said was, and if that's okay in your area, your business, your section, that's great. And so I just I can see where some people, especially in higher ed, might be thinking, where is our line and what does that look like, and how can we best address that? So that's why I'm really specifically thinking this might trigger some thoughts later for people to follow up on.
I've had professors that swore more than service members, but it's
it's a challenge here at USM sometimes, huh, Rodney?
It is loud voices and stuff, but once you kind of get through that, it does dwindle down. I think part of it is a trust component of them feeling comfortable with you, and that's kind of that. And it is part of, it is what they bring. It's part of that, the luggage that all our students bring, and it's all different. But we work together, and I know when I taught the class that we brought that up, and that was, can we cuss? And I'm like, okay. But then someone saw my expression. They said, but the next goal will be, we'll reduce it by the end of the semester. I said, okay, we can work.
Well, I mean, and the thing in what's real is, no matter what rank you're at, you've got a superior. And even though we cuss when we're talking to each other in the military, we don't necessarily do it when we're talking to a superior. So if you can just convince your veterans that you have been serving the non-veterans in that room for however long you've been serving, you've been working for them. So just think of them as a bunch of generals sitting around you, and how you would talk if a bunch of generals were sitting around you. We do have the ability to shut it off if we want to. Now, you want to go back to the union or back to your dorm room or back to your house, use whatever language you want. But in here, this is what we do. And like I said, you might get the eye roll. The next time you'll go, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that again. So.
But I do think part of our job as we're helping them is, I don't want them to think of me as the general, and I don't want them, because that's not my role. I want to be working with them. So but then in order to get that, I have to earn that respect and then earn that trust. And so that, it takes time with that. And it's also it's what they need to do once they get out of college. So that transition, they've got to learn that difference. There is the hierarchy, but it is a little different than
Yep.
the military once they get to civilian life. But it's still a process, and sometimes it takes 4 years.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes, if in counseling, especially now that I'm a colonel, it can be pretty intimidating to somebody who's coming to me for help. And sometimes I'll drop a bad word or two just so that they'll feel more comfortable, because I don't care. I mean, I've been dealing with veterans. I also play hockey, and I'm from New York, so I've got I've got the evil triad of bad language. So I'm perfectly comfortable with it. Everyone has to decide what they're comfortable with, and that's the important thing.
Hey, Colonel, I appreciate you saying all that. I just think there's a huge difference between, swear words and vulgarity, and especially when you're trying to teach veterans how to reintegrate into professional work environments. I think it's really kind of important to kind of put that in check as well. What do you think?
Well, you just muted yourself, so I didn't hear the end of your question.
I just want to get your take on it. I think there's a huge difference between vulgarity and inappropriate language in a professional work setting or an academic setting. And then swears are normal for our culture, but I'd just like to get your take on that, especially when we're trying to work with veterans to reintegrate them into professional work settings.
I hear you. And it's all going to be what the environment is. I mean, if you're working at Bath Iron Works and you're down on the docks, it's going to sound like military talk. If you're working for a bank and you've got people coming in off the street, not so good. So as I said earlier, veterans are extremely adaptable. We're very flexible. And if we are told what the left and right limits are when we walk in, such as no swearing, and we're very clear about it. One of the reasons I bring that up is I don't want people to be afraid to tell the veteran to rein it in, because we're afraid they're going to have like a PTSD attack or something like that. No, it's very appropriate to say, hey, that's a little too much. My suggestion is not to do it in the middle of the classroom, to do it off, to take outside, take the person alone and say, hey, look, today you said things and probably shouldn't have put it in that way. We do have some people in the classroom who might be a little sensitive. To take that into consideration. Love your passion. Don't necessarily think that we should be using that type of language. Same thing in a work setting. Love the passion, love the excitement. That's not how we speak here. And that is a very important thing, whether it just be an F-bomb just as an adjective versus actually speak sexual things, bathroom humor, that type of stuff. That in and of itself is going to be automatically offensive to people in the room. My suggestion is to always be straight with, well, not just a veteran, but anybody you're working with. You shouldn't beat around the bush about it. And if you're in a position of any type of leadership, that doesn't necessarily mean the professor. I mean, it could be the student grad assistant. It could be one of your coworkers. It could be another veteran in the class who says, hey, dude, calm down a little bit, okay? It's not appropriate here. And we owe that to each other. We owe that because they don't realize they're doing it. In the same way, a lot of veterans come off as being angry because we're very intense, and like I said, we stare at you. We don't know we look like that. I came back from Afghanistan, and 2 months after that, my wife was telling me, why are you always so angry? I said, I'm not angry, I'm fine. And then I was playing golf with another couple, my wife and another couple, and the other wife said to me, and she swears like a sailor, by the way. She said, why are you always so freaking angry? And I'm like, I'm not angry. And she said, yes, you are. And because she wasn't my wife, I actually listened to her. So we don't realize we're doing that. We don't realize we're using that language all the time. We don't realize that that we come off as we do, and because it's completely appropriate in a military setting. It's actually completely appropriate in several settings that are non-military, but most settings where you're dealing with other people, no, it's not acceptable. And we need to know that, and we need to be told that, and we need to be reminded of it when we do it.
All right. Well, I think oh, wait a minute. I think there's a question here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think we are. And I appreciate your staying. I know we kept you a little bit over, and I appreciate those of you who stayed on and went a little bit over as well. As Colonel Gibson said at the start of this, it's been a long day, and we appreciate your hanging there with us. It's a lot of Zoom. He is, I will just say for my part, I have had the pleasure of working with Colonel Gibson for many, many years, and he is very approachable. He's very candid, as you saw here today. And so I encourage you, as you're looking at, the veterans that you're working with, if you do have specific questions or you're looking for a little guidance or hey, what do you think? He's really, really great at telling you what he thinks. And so I just encourage you that if you are looking for somebody who's well-versed in military culture and has done a lot of these presentations, he is a great resource and a wealth of knowledge. And we are not losing him from being a resource in the state of Maine. I'm sure that announcement will be coming soon. So just if you don't know him, if you haven't built a relationship with him, if you haven't networked with him, I really encourage you to do so. He's a fabulous resource.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
And remember, as a chaplain, I'm bound by 100% confidentiality, so you can tell me whatever you want, even if it's mean.
All right. Well, thank you again. I appreciate your being here. And everybody, thank you folks for being here. It was a long day. Hope you learned a lot, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.